Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teach University. In this lecture today, we're going to be discussing brain power or the science behind neuroplasticity and really how the brain, in fact, can change and how our thoughts and habits and habitual actions can over time shape our brain either in a much more empowering or negative way. But the point is here, thanks to the latest in the science behind neuroplasticity, the brain can actually change for the better depending on how we use it. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not a mental health professional. This lecture is for educational purposes only. That if you are experiencing mental distress, please seek out the help of a mental health care professional. Again, this lecture is for educational purposes only, so just wanted to disclose that. So, like with every lecture, I want to start with a quote, and this is from James Allen from As a Man Thinketh, who said that let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation it will effect in the material conditions of his life. Men imagine that thought can be kept secret, but it cannot. It rapidly crystallizes into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstance. So I think James Allen was really talking about neuroplasticity before many people even knew what it was. This was, of course, written in his book As a Man Thinketh, which was released in the earlier part of the 20th century. But I think what he's saying here is that how our habitual thoughts and actions can shape not only our destiny, but it can also shape how we think, and it can shape our brains in such a way where it can either empower us or it can hold us back. And again, our habitual thoughts and actions can shape our destiny and can transform us in a much more positive way and can change the material conditions of our life, whether our external circumstances to our bodies and really the physical brain and how it operates. Again, our thoughts are extremely powerful, as you'll see in this lecture, that it can really transform the brain either for the better or for worse. So then what really causes then a bad brain or a brain that's not functioning optimally? Well, obviously stress is a big one, and stress and depression and anxiety are one of the most common mental ailments that are impacting society today. Chronic stress over time can damage the brain. It can give us brain fog where we're just not thinking clearly. And again, a lot of other negative consequences as a result of stress. Poor diet and lack of exercise, of course, is another reason. Again, diets high in sugar, and of course, lack of exercise can impair the brain, where again, we're just not using it optimally and can really, again, poor diet and lack of exercise can also lead to stress and depression and anxiety. Again, there's studies that show that just diet and lack of exercise alone can lead to that. Persistent and intrusive negative thoughts and habits. Again, our thoughts are extremely powerful, and our persistent and negative thoughts can really impact the brain in a negative way, where if we're constantly worrying and thinking negative thoughts, again, that can lead to then depression and anxiety. And again, we've seen that depression and anxiety can really prevent us from using our brains in a constructive way. Now working out the brain, again, a little grammar error there. Now working the brain out where we're not taking on challenges that really get us to work and use our creative abilities to solve problems. Avoiding problems and challenges is actually the last thing you want to do when it comes to improving your brain. You want to be able to take on challenges that are not necessarily too difficult, but not easy. You want to strike that balance where we experience that state of flow where we're just firing all cylinders. So taking on challenges and working the brain out, or even doing something as simple as playing a board game or solving a puzzle can be very constructive for the brain. Of course, tech addiction, using our cell phones on a consistent basis, where we become addicted to it. Being addicted to technology like social media can have negative consequences for the brain. And then also genetic factors as well. Also, genetic disorders can also contribute to, not using our brain more efficiently, and also creating a host of other mental health issues. But we can see that most of the behaviors that we engage in can impact the brain either in a positive or negative brain. So what that means ultimately is that many of us have the power to be able to change the brain for the better, depending on our thoughts and our habits that we engage in on a daily basis. So really, in the late 19th and early part of the 20th century, many psychologists believed that the brain was fixed, that it could not change, and that when it came to dealing with mental health disorders that so many people were struggling with, that the best thing we can do is just reach a baseline where maybe the person wasn't suffering, but they weren't necessarily flourishing or living happier, healthier lives. But Psychologists like William James and Carl Jung and Abraham Maslow, and Maslow, who I've referenced a lot in many of my lectures, believe otherwise. They believe that human beings had deeper mental faculties that, if utilized, can transform their lives and they can really optimize their lives for the better, where they can really flourish and actually enjoy living. And that's something that I think James and Young and Maslow discuss in a lot of their work, especially Abraham Maslow, who I reference in using his hierarchy of needs, where when you look at that pyramid, and I'll add some of my lectures where I discuss Maslow, where when you go look through that pyramid, when you satisfy basic underlying needs like food, water, shelter, and etc., and safety, there are other higher level psychological needs that need to be satisfied, like satisfaction, relationships, meaningful work, and so forth. And then when you look at that pinnacle of that pyramid, the pinnacle of human expression, or the pinnacle of human experience for that matter, is authentic creative expression. So when we become our authentic selves, when we utilize all of our mental faculties, that's when we can really flourish. And more modern day contemporary psychologists like Martin Seligman, who is considered the father of modern psychology, I think would agree with Maslow that we all have the ability to flourish. And to quote Seligman, who said, "I used to think that the topic of positive psychology was happiness, that the gold standard for measuring happiness was life satisfaction, and that the goal of positive psychology was to increase life satisfaction. I now think that the topic of positive psychology is well-being, that the gold standard for measuring well-being is flourishing, and that the goal of positive psychology is to increase flourishing. This theory, which I call well-being theory, is very different from authentic happiness theory, and the difference requires explanation." So what he's saying here, it's not just about being happy, it's about flourishing and improving our overall well-being in various aspects of our lives, and that we have much more control over our lives than first thought. We may not necessarily be able to control everything outside of us, but we can control how we react to our circumstances, and we can ultimately monitor our stream of consciousness in such a way. We can alter our thoughts and habits that can help us flourish and improve our lives for the better. And by doing so, then we can in fact change the brain, thanks because of neuroplasticity. So to quote William James, he said, "Sow an action and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny." So James again saying here that our habits, our habitual habits over time, how we think, how we feel, how we act over time, can either hold us back or can empower us and shape our destiny for the better. So we all have the power within us to change, and by making new thoughts, by producing new habits, that can change the brain for the better. So then what is then neuroplasticity? What is the technical definition? Well, neuroplasticity then can be viewed as a general umbrella term that refers to the brain's ability to modify, change, and adapt both structure and function throughout life in response to experience. So again, and I stress in response to experience. So what we impress on the brain through our thoughts and our habits and our actions and behaviors habitually over time can shape the brain. And when we make changes, we make new thoughts, when we produce new thoughts and habits, when we change our behavior, we become much more deliberate in where we want to go, we can change the brain through something called Hebb's law, where we make new neural connections, that these new neural connections can reshape the brain and modify our behavior. So let's go back a little bit here to kind of, again, flush this out a little bit more when it comes to neuroplasticity. So many of us, as we started off as children, we were like sponges. We weren't so analytical. We had vivid imaginations, and we were able to play and experiment and try new things, and we were much more open-minded. And the reason for that, again, is because as we were born and we progressed through childhood, our analytical brains aren't fully developed. So we're like sponges. So we absorb everything that happens in our external environment, or what we see, what we hear, and we use our five senses to develop new ideas and perceptions about ourselves and the world around us. But chances are, for many of us experience trauma. That trauma could be bullying in school, it could be financial hardship, it could be abuse, it could be loneliness, or any other trauma that can really impact our lives, because obviously that trauma and the emotional intensity behind it can really impact our psyche and our consciousness. It can help develop over time what are called self-limiting beliefs because of the trauma that we've experienced when we were younger or when we were adults. So this trauma then leads us to these self-limiting beliefs that lead to then habits and thought patterns and behaviors that could be counterproductive and can hold us back and prevent us from really being able to use our brains in such a way, or to use our brains more efficiently, that can help improve our quality of life as a result of these habitual patterns and these behaviors. And when it comes to many of our habits, 95% of our habits are totally unconscious, meaning that many of our behaviors we don't even realize, we don't even are aware of, because many of them are unconscious. They're unconscious behaviors because through repetitive thoughts and actions and behaviors that through repetition over time cement these personality traits. And our personality then shapes our own personal reality. But the good news then, though, well, or at least what was once believed that the brain couldn't change, in fact, the brain can change depending on what we impress upon it. So, to quote a study from MIT, our brains are famously flexible or plastic because neurons can do new things by forging new or stronger connections with other neurons. But if some connections strengthen, neuroscientists have reasoned neurons must compensate lest they become overwhelmed with input. In a new study in Science, researchers at the Peikhauer Institute for Learning and Memory at MIT demonstrate for the first time how this balance is struck. When one connection called the synapses strengthens, immediately neighboring synapses weaken. So again, when we go back to the term Hebb's law, whatever fires together wires together, our repetitive thoughts and actions can strengthen specific neural networks and weaken others. So to kind of flush this out again, that means that we can create new behaviors or positive behaviors and weaken more negative behaviors. Okay, so again, what this shows is that what we impress in the brain, our thoughts and habits, and the changes that we can make can be much more deliberate or be much more conscious about our behaviors. That in of itself can create new neural connections that can modify our behaviors for the better. And again, we see that here. And this is just one of many studies that show how, again, we have the ability to reshape our brain in such a way that's much more conducive to positive thought and behaviors. So to quote Joe Dispenza, who's one of my favorite authors, and he's really very experienced and advanced in this field. He's written a number of books on this, and he's become very popular in the personal growth and mystic space, I would say, when it comes to discussing neuroplasticity. He says that we can all intellectually understand that the brain can manage and regulate many diverse functions throughout the rest of the body. But how responsible are we for the job our brain is doing as CEO of the body? Whether we like it or not, once a thought happens in the brain, the rest is history. All of the body reactions that occur from both our intentional or unintentional thinking unfold behind the scenes of our awareness. When you come right down to it, it is startling to realize how influential and extensive the effects of one or two conscious or unconscious thoughts can be. So again, what Dispenza is saying here is that our thoughts are extremely powerful. One conscious or unconscious thought can empower us or hold us back. And how often has that happened where maybe we're working on an activity, or maybe we're relaxing or doing something that's totally unrelated to our work, and then all of a sudden we have this thought that comes out of nowhere and can maybe put us in a bad mood. Maybe it's a memory of an argument we had with a loved one, or maybe the memory of a bad experience we had in the past. And really, our past memories can impact the way we think in the present moment. So we allow our past to dictate how we think and how we feel today, and that can also impact what can happen in the future. So we essentially allow our past experiences to determine our future. And again, our thoughts, whether conscious or unconscious, can really be a side effect of that, and ultimately can impact the brain in positive or negative ways. So to leave behind what is considered normal amidst social convention and to create a new mind requires being an individual for any species. Being uncompromising in one's vision of a new and improved self and abandoning one's prior ways of being may also be encoded in living tissue for new generations. History remembers individuals for such elegance. True evolution, then, is using the genetic wisdom of past experiences as raw materials for new challenges. So, what dispenza is saying here is that to change and to embrace and adopt personal transformation, it requires holding a vision of a better future, a vision so powerful that it overcomes the circumstances that you're currently experiencing, even it overcomes the circumstances of your current behaviors and way of thinking. And when you hold on to that vision and you become much more aware and conscious of where you want to go and where you currently are in life, you can begin to make new choices. And those new choices that you make can impact not just yourself, but your future generations or your future children and family members. And by using the wisdom of the past of people that came before us, who were able to adopt such a powerful vision, we can use those materials for change and to overcome our circumstances and current mental distress that we are experiencing. So again, it just comes to show that we have the power, we have the mental toolkit necessary to be able to change the brain and change our lives for the better. And that all starts then with a concept that is called metacognition. What is metacognition? All that really means is to begin thinking about how you're thinking. And again, I've said this before that many of our behaviors, 95% of our behaviors, are totally unconscious. So that means that the moment we wake up in the morning and before we go to bed, we want to be much more deliberate and conscious of our behaviors and what's negatively impacting us. And just by being much more aware, and actually by just learning new information, by watching this lecture right now, you are beginning to make new neural connections because you're learning new information that if you apply can help improve your life for the better. So it's all about awareness, self-awareness, being aware of where you are and where you want to go and being much more deliberate in the direction of where you want to go when it comes to how you think and how you feel and the kind of results that you want to produce in your life. So what are some ways in changing the brain? It starts with asking empowering questions. Many of us, without even realizing it, ask disempowering questions like, oh, why am I so bad at this? Why is it I can't get in a relationship? Why am I so bad with money? Why am I overweight? We ask ourselves these disempowering questions that, you guessed it, will give us disempowering answers. So we want to ask ourselves empowering questions. And we can do this through when we're doing meditation. And the term meditation means know thyself. When we meditate and we take time away from everything that bombards us in our external environment and we ask empowering questions and we begin to meditate on our answers and what kind of new thoughts we produce, again, that of itself can help change the brain for the better. Simply making new choices. Maybe instead of going to Starbucks in the morning for coffee, you go to somewhere else, or you make coffee at the office or at home. Or maybe when you get that Starbucks coffee, instead of standing in line by yourself or in the drive-thru, maybe you can converse with somebody else who's next to you in line. Have a conversation with them. Just making those simple new choices can create new experiences that can in of itself change the brain. Don't stop learning. That means we want to learn new information. Again, just by watching this lecture right now that I've created. Learning new information can change the brain because when we learn new information and we apply that information, that creates new experiences that can make an impact for the better when it comes to how we think. Stepping away. Again, we meditate and step away from the busyness of everyday life. That's why taking a long stroll, go for a walk, or exercise, or just do something that is totally unrelated to our daily lives. And that's why sometimes more people now are starting to go on retreats. They're starting to go on meditative retreats and stepping away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life so they can take the time to define their own lives rather than letting what happens outside of them define the way they think and feel. That's why stepping away is very important. And then, most importantly, taking on challenges. There's this misconception that in order for us to improve our lives, or I guess to change the way we think or alleviate stress for that matter, we don't want to take on challenges. No, we want to take challenges head on. We want to do things that help us grow. And again, we've talked about flow. When we enter these flow states, when we're doing activities that aren't so difficult but aren't easy enough, where they're just difficult enough to challenge us and force us to use these higher mental faculties that we have. And when we enter these states of flow, again, there's biological processes involved in this, where serotonin, dopamine, these feel-good chemicals are all being flushed into our body. When we're in these states of flow, where nothing else seems to matter, we're totally immersed in what we're doing, that's when the good stuff happens. That's when we become much more receptive to new ideas and experiences. And that's when really the brain is functioning at its best, when we're in these states of flow. And that starts with taking on new challenges and things that help us grow. That can be new projects at work, maybe new projects that you want to work on, maybe new habits that you want to engage in that maybe are going to be a little bit difficult to start at first. Maybe like, as I use that example with the Starbucks, okay? Striking new conversations with random strangers can be very challenging, okay? But it's something that is important because the more you do it, the more you can overcome these self-limiting beliefs about trying to have new conversations, developing new relationships. And our hobbies that we have, taking on new hobbies, can also help us improve the brain. In fact, those hobbies that we engage in can lead to potentially new businesses that can change our lives as well. So to end this lecture, I want to borrow a fable from the book The Instant Millionaire by Mark Fisher, which is one of my favorite books. I read it almost every day. It's a very quick read. But in basically the synopsis of the book is that it's about a young man who is struggling with money. He's broke. He works at a job he doesn't like, and he aspires to be a millionaire. And he befriends this man who is literally called the Instant Millionaire, who lives in this grand house in this neighborhood, not far from where the young man lives. And he befriends this Instant Millionaire, and he stays with him several days because the Instant Millionaire promises him that he's going to share the secrets of wealth that will make him a millionaire. And one evening, when he returns to his room, he notices a letter or a piece of paper on his bed. And when he opens the letter, it says that you are going to die tomorrow. And it's written several times in this piece of paper. Now, of course, the man is in a panic. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He feels like his life is threatened. He can't leave the room because the bedroom is locked. When he looks outside of his window, he notices a man in a black robe approaching. He begins to panic. And when the man in the black robe enters the room, the young man discovers it's actually the Instant Millionaire, who tells him, "Why are you so panicked? What I've written in that sheet of paper are just words." So the point of the story is that words are extremely powerful, and the way we communicate with ourselves and the way we communicate with others can impact our quality of life and how we think. And when you attach power to words through, for example, affirmations, when you say to yourself, "I am going to be a much happier person," when you realize those words have weight, they'll have a much more impact to you subconsciously than you may have realized before. Because what happens with so many people is that they use affirmations and they meditate, but it doesn't have much of an impact because they don't realize the weight and power that words have. So once you discover how powerful words are, you would take much more seriously the words you communicate with yourself and others that can impact the way you think and feel in your relationship with yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you in class next time. Take care.